So I'm James Lynch. I'm the executive director of the Arts Center Highland Park, and I am talking with Jennifer Markowitz, who is one of the 9 artists who are part of our current show, Fiber, Fashion, and Feminism. So Jennifer, rather than me make an introduction, why don't you please introduce yourself a little bit and your work?
I am talking to you from Raleigh, North Carolina. I lived in Chicago on and off for a long time, so I've got some very profound memories there, and a lot of my work actually has Chicago in it. My work it's almost exclusively embroidery, and the pieces that are in this show are part of a larger series that I think I have like 9 pieces in the show, maybe 8. And they're part of a larger show, a series called Flesh Map. It's 20 pieces in total. And it is a geographic memory, a mapping of my life up until 2016. Starting in 1985 when I was 17. And it started because I've lived so many different places. I've lived in several countries. I've lived in several cities. I've lived in Raleigh now for 5 years, and that's the longest by 4 years that I've ever lived anywhere since I graduated from high school when I was 17.
Wow.
So part of it was remembering traumatic events, interesting events that happened to me, and being able to remember all of that. And I've always been a journal keeper, but not being able to remember the order. And like there was there was 2 years where I was living in 3 different countries, going back and forth because of relationship I was in and because of place I was teaching and also directing. And I was going back and forth through those countries. I can't remember how many times, but I think it was like 15 times. And so one of the pieces, which is not in the show, is this giant bed sheet of all of those countries and arrows going back and forth and marking the dates, because I needed to figure out the order of things in order to relocate everything.
You and I know each other through both being theater directors in Chicago.
Yeah.
And even though I'm way older than you, like way older than you.
No, we'll talk about that off camera.
We'll talk about that. But we were contemporaries, and even in that, there were not a lot of really strong women directors stepping out, the way you did. There really isn't, right now even, but you had a great reputation, really strong, and you did a powerful show, and I enjoyed, what you did. And then I saw, through social media, we kind of kept track, and I saw you starting this Flesh Map, and I set it off before we started recording, and I thought it was like a hobby that you were doing. And then even recently, when we were putting this show together, I went back and I looked, and the way I described it is like, here's somebody pouring their soul out in their artwork. And that's the way I describe what you're doing. And I wish I had some right here, to hold up and show what you're looking at. But really, when an artist is an artist has to have a point of view in order to be, strong and relevant. And yours is just like sharing everything. You really rip your chest open and say, here, this is me, this is my life. You think I'm accurate on what I'm saying?
I think it's sort of the way I approach directing, except that it's more, I'm able to make it more personal, because in directing, you're interpreting somebody else's text. It's not anything that's personal is sort of fed into it in a very private, secret way. But I think the similarity is that I'm just always, the most important thing to me is to be unflinching. in whatever you do, and that you have to get to the truth of whatever it is. And so that causes a lot of vulnerability and a lot of revealing a lot of personal things. And I am unapologetic about that, because it's the truth, but it's not just about me. Because there's not a lot of direct language throughout the series. There are, because it feels a lot like journal entries, because a lot of it came directly from journals. And a lot of it was feeling like what I was trying to express there was no language for it. And so I think that's another reason why I started to think of it visually. But I do think it isn't so much about feeling the need for the world to know me or for me to expose myself, as much as if this is what the subject is, then I can't be coy about it. I have to get to the truth of it, because everything that aches a little bit or is ripped open, that's where you find the beauty.
Well, also there's a lot of people who are trying to do art and say, I'm going to put my heart out there, I'm going to put my, my meaning into it. But your artistry in it, your pieces are gorgeous. Just approaching them from look. We used one, I hope you saw it on, we've got a banner outside advertising this outside our building, and we used the image of it's like the bustier or the bra.
Oh yeah, the manic episode dress. Yeah.
Love it. And it looks gorgeous in the gallery.
Oh, great. I was worried about sending that to you guys and like the shape, because it's very fragile. That piece took me 2 years to make, because it was never the feeling that I wanted it to be, which is what a manic episode feels like. And I kept using different materials and going through all of these different processes, and it wasn't right. And so I would start over again and scrap it. And I think I did that 4 or 5 times. And then I realized while I was attaching those flowers to this white, it's all needle lace. It's needle lace from wire, that it's not a feeling that can ever really be translated to somebody, because it's not a real feeling. It's a feeling, it's a real feeling, but it's not an accurate representation of anything, because a manic episode is just like depression. It's your brain lying to you. And so I realized that those flowers they didn't have to be so stiff. They could sort of fall apart, because that is what's happening during a manic episode.
Well, I mean, it's a beautiful piece, and one of the it's a slip that what do you say, is embroidering or stitching?
It's all embroidery. All I do is embroidery. Yeah.
And one of them, it's hanging in. We've got 2 galleries set up, actually 4 galleries set up, but yours is in one of the smaller galleries as well. And it's hanging in the corner, and it's just the way the air conditioner hits it. It keeps turning.
And that's what I love. That's why I put them on
perfect.
hangers, because the hangers make them twirl like they're ghosts. And it is, those pieces in which I've used garments are really about the absence of the body, which is why there's a slight shape to them, but it's kind of like what we leave behind on our clothes.
And they're kind of ripped and torn on the bottom, like they've been through it.
They've been through it. They're all distressed and deconstructed, because that's what happens to your body as well as your clothes.
Yeah. Is there a piece out of your whole collection of Flesh Map? And I don't know, how many pieces do you think that would be if we were to?
That's 20.
That's 20 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a piece that you like, that's you, that you go, oh, I love that piece, or identify, or you hate that piece, but it's like the one piece that sets everything, that everything comes together in?
I think the manic episode is probably the one that is the result of all of these other experiences, which is why it's toward the end of the series. And also, I have developed more skills as I was working on that, because I was moving even further into 3D. But each panel is a story in its own. And when I had the whole show hung here in Raleigh at Art Space last year, and we didn't put anything in order because that's not how memory works. And so that fragmentation, and I think the other thing is that the show is centered around a suitcase, which was the suitcase that I had been using back and forth for countries for like 15 years. And by the time I brought it here to Raleigh, it was barely a suitcase. And a lot of painful things happened to me when I first moved here. So what I did was I took that suitcase, which was falling apart anyway, and tore it apart down to its skeleton, and then put a bunch of wired flowers all over it and a lot of artifacts from hospital visits and maps. And that was the center of the show. So all of those panels are surrounding it, and that's the anchor.
You know, while you were saying that, I'm getting this whole, you know, because of both of our backgrounds as directors and theater, and I admit it, when I help hang a show here, when I oversee the lighting at the end, I'm trying to make it very theatrical.
And it's different.
I make sure that the lights are right, that the sound is right. You know, we have music playing, and that, you know, it's the same as staging a piece. But hearing that explanation of that exhibit, you are telling a story. You know, you're laying it out.
Yeah, it's just not linear. It's more of a feeling than a story.
Sure.
Because I don't need the viewer to be able to process facts or actions like you do in a play. I want them to come away with whatever they come away with, and it doesn't, hopefully not completely or at all about me. It's about creating a feeling. And that is something that for theater was the most important thing to me, is to create this visceral experience. And so it's telling a story through experience rather than events.
Yeah. Well, it's really great to look at it through this lens, through yours, because one of the things I always say about theater is that you're more in control of the narrative and the audience experience. And when you do a piece of art and you put it out there, you can't stand there the whole time and say, explain the piece. They're going to have their own, I get it. Yeah, they're going to have their own experience of it.
Yeah, because it's so much more open to and more people getting something out of it. And people listen and look and pay attention in very different ways. And in theater, you really do have to pay attention in one specific way. And also in terms of putting on a show, when I was first started, I really was doing the directing thing on the first show that I did. And like, I wanted everybody to see the panels in order. And that is a control that works really well for a director, because we were trained, your job is to tell the story as the playwright intends it. Yeah. But I'm not creating theater it's not theater, it's not performative. And so I find it incredibly freeing not to have to do that, because there's just, you can do it wrong so much more easily in theater.
I'm not going to ask you about that one because we're going to run out of time, but I do want to talk about that at some point. But I want to also, because when people see this, I want to mention that you've got a website, and some of the stuff on there is not part of Flesh Map, but it's more whimsical, like the check, you know,
the stimulus mask.
Stimulus mask, the t-shirts that you do, you know, to order. They're a lot of fun. They're great looking, and so there's both sides to it. You know, there's a lot going on. So what would be next? And then I'm going to wrap up, because what do you think are you done with Flesh Map yet? Is it going to continue, or what's next?
I may come back to it, but I feel like I've done everything I need to do with it. I'm starting to explore, I don't know, I had this idea about creating something all out of broken umbrellas. I'm thinking more about garments and how they tell our stories, which is not a unique idea by any means, but it has to do with the placement of them. And I'm also gotten very interested in the history of women and madness, mostly because of the physicality of the women. And I don't know, there's something about that that's informing me. I'm back into an experimental phase now.
All right, well, I'm going to end this conversation, but we're going to have more conversations.
Okay,
I'm excited by what you're talking about, and this is the stuff that we love to have here at the gallery. So you'll be here for the opening on the 20th?
Yes.
Yes, still?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll try and have a nice audience for people to meet you. I'll throw your website information up because I know your work's for sale. And,
yes, it is.
And it's wonderful. I'm so glad to reconnect with you again. I can't wait to see you on the 20th. And thank you for taking the time with me. So,
thank you, James. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for including me in this show.
okay, great. Thank you.
Bye.